I'm Lt.Col Dick Merritt, United States Marine Corps, retired. Today is the 5th of June, 2007, and we're interviewing Jim Markalunas, Marine Corps in Korea. Jim was born on the 3rd of May, 1930, and I'm working with the Roaring Fork Veterans History Project in association with the Library of Congress. Jim, what branch of the service did you serve with?
Proud to be a United States Marine.
Marine Corps, proud of the Marines.
That's right.
And what was your...
I guess I should say to have been, you know.
Once a Marine, always a Marine.
Once a Marine, always a Marine.
That's right, Jim.
Not as mean, not as lean, but still a Marine.
But still a Marine. And what war did you serve in?
The Korean conflict. They said it was a police action, but given the casualties and the action that occurred, it was definitely a war. No question about that.
And what years were you in Korea, Jim?
I was in the last half of 51 and the first half of 52. So basically a year, June of 51 to June of 52.
Well, were you an infantryman, or what was your...
Well, every Marine's an infantryman or a rifleman. You train that way in boot camp, and you know, I qualified as a marksman. I didn't make expert, but or sharpshooter, I should say, sharpshooter at Camp Matthews at the rifle range just outside of San Diego. That Camp Matthews is gone too now. So, but I went to San Diego for my basic training. And then after my basic training, I graduated from basic training where I was assigned to a transport squadron up at Lt.Col Marine Corps Air Station, which is also no longer in existence anymore. I wanted another base closure, but I tried to find it on the map. I couldn't even find it on the map.
Times change, don't they, Jim?
They sure do.
Let's back off a little bit to what brought you into the Marine Corps. Where were you raised?
Well, I was raised here in Aspen. Part of the time I was raised in Denver at the orphanage at Mount St. Vincent's in Denver. My mother was widowed when I was just 2 years old. My dad died of tuberculosis. My mother was born and raised here in Aspen. Actually, 100 years ago, she would have been if she was born April 2nd of 1907 here in Aspen. My grandfather came over the range, as they used to say, from Leadville. He was a mining surveyor. He came in 1880 and came as part of an exploration party of prospectors, and had read about the Aspen strikes in Leadville. So he came over here and he liked what he saw, and so he went back to Leadville and he married my grandmother, I think, in 1885, and brought her over from Leadville, and they settled down in Aspen, bought a lot from J.R. Williams, and worked in the mines, and up until 1915 when he passed away from pneumonia or miner's consumption. And my grandmother, she passed away in 1928. My mother was graduated in 1926 from Aspen High School, and then she went to St. Francis Hospital in Colorado Springs for her nurse's training, and that's where she met my dad. Colorado Springs was a resort for people who suffered from tuberculosis. That my dad was from a coal mining town in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and they met in Colorado Springs, and they were married I believe in 1928, and I came along in 1930. I was born in San Diego because I think my aunt and uncle and some of my mother's relatives had settled in the San Diego area, so that's why I came to be born in San Diego. And but she brought me back to Aspen on the train when I was six weeks old. So there was there was an early influence of train influence there.
So you came to Aspen when you were 6 months old.
6 weeks old, actually.
6 weeks old.
6 weeks old, and but anyway, my father passed away in 1932, so my mother had to kind of support herself, being a widow and everything, and there was no employment, nothing going on in Aspen, absolutely nothing. So she went to Colorado Springs and to Denver and worked in some of the hospitals there, and she boarded me in the orphanage for a while. But she would come up during the summer months or whenever she could to visit the family. And I remember my first train ride into Aspen was in 1939. And
the train was still running?
The train was still running. And I also remember, in Denver, watching the veterans, the Civil War veterans, and they would have a parade on 16th Street. And I remember seeing the veterans in blue, and I don't think there were any gray ones I can remember, but at least there were some Union veterans in 1938. Because, if I remember right, 1938 was it that 50th? Maybe not. I'm not remember what the anniversary of Gettysburg that was, but it wouldn't have been.
Maybe 150.
I don't remember. No, it was less than. Because there were still survivors of the Civil War.
Well, speaking of the Civil War, Jim, I know that you're the sexton involved of the Aspen Grove Cemetery. Are there any Civil War veterans here?
There are
in
at
Aspen?
least. Well, there's a whole row of Civil War monuments in the Youth Cemetery, and there's quite a few Civil War veterans, mostly all Union veterans in the Aspen Grove Cemetery. And of course, we always honor our veterans, at the cemetery, on Veterans Day and on Memorial Day. So that's cool.
And then Red Butte Cemetery too.
And Red Butte Cemetery too. That's where my grandfather and grandmother are buried.
Well, Dan Glidden, who is a Navy veteran and was interviewed here on this program on Memorial Day, put 127 flags up at Red Butte Cemetery on veterans' graves, and 25 at Youth Cemetery.
And I placed 22. 22, maybe 23. 22 flags at the
Is there any
Cemetery.
veterans activities going on at Aspen Grove Cemetery these days?
Yes, there are. In fact, Curly, that we just recently installed a base for a flagpole. We're going to have a dedication of a flag, the flagpole on Flag Day this year, and hopefully the local veterans will be out to hoist the colors, as they say.
Well, it's always good to see you, Jim, out at the Memorial Day and Veterans Day at the courthouse and carrying that banner, once a Marine, always a Marine. Well, Jim, let's go back to World War II and your days of your youth. Can you remember any military activities that were going on around town?
Well, yes. The one thing that I recall is I just lived just a couple of blocks east of the depot, the rail yards, and of course, Aspen had a daily train that came in every day, without fail, to deliver the mail and to bring in the Railway Express and passengers. And in 1942, of course, I recall when at the outbreak of World War II was, it was Sunday, and the usual thing to do on a Sunday morning was to read the comic strips. That's what I was doing, was reading the comic strips and listening to, and then the news came over the radio about I think it may have been maybe late morning or mid-afternoon sometime, I don't remember when, but I remember that the news coming over and everybody, hearing about Pearl Harbor. But then in the summer of '42, the 87th Regiment, I think of the 10th Mountain Division, was locating at Pando. Pando was a siding on the DNRG near Leadville. I think it's on the west side of Tennessee Pass, and a group of 10th Mountain soldiers or trainees came by train. They came by train with their mules and the equipment for a training exercise, and they came into the Aspen rail yards. And of course, as a boy, I was only 12 years old, but as a boy, I remember them unloading their mules and and they had corrals down there, and they put the mules in the corrals there for a while, but then they got them organized, and we followed them as every kid will. Every kid in town, I think, followed them. They marched with their packs and all their field gear and everything, and the mules and everything up Mill Street and right down Main Street, and marched all the way out. We followed them all the way past what we refer to now as the S curves. The highway did go around the same way it does now, across the old steel bridge that rattled and shook, and out to Castle Creek, and from there on it was a dirt road, and that's about where we kind of gave it up. But I remember following them. They marched, and they marched all the way up to Ashcroft. That was a 12-mile hike, and with the mules and their field packs on, they went up there, and they had a training exercise there, and they were there for a good part of the summer. And then in the fall, they brought their mules and their equipment back down, and same way they came up down Castle Creek. They had done exercises and climbing and bivouacking in the mountains south of Ashcroft, and then they decided they were going to take a hike overland to Pandle, and they were going to go up Hunter Creek and over the range, and over what was known as the Williams Mountains or someplace. But the weather change went bad. I think this is sometime in October, and we got one of those October snowfalls, and the snow up in Hunter Creek was really deep, and the mules, they were having all kinds of trouble with the mules floundering in the snow and everything, deep snow, so they decided that it wasn't worth risking damage to their mules and stuff, so they basically they came back out and boarded and loaded back on the train, and they went by rail back to Pando to the siding at Camp Hale. But that was an exercise I remember, and I was disappointed that this book, I think it's called Soldiers to the Summit, didn't have that incident in there, because I recall it very well as a boy seeing those guys unload, and because I hung around the depot all the time, and I used to love to watch the trains come in and everything. So that was my hangout.
That was your hangout. So war came to Aspen, World War II. Was there anything different as far as, say, the food you ate or toys you played with?
Everybody, yeah.
Was there any sacrifice on the
Yes,
part
there
of
was.
the locals?
Everybody participated. In fact, I remember scrap drives, a lot of the mining machinery, some of the steel conduit or the penstocks that used to come out of Hunter Creek that fed the Aspen Art Museum. That was an early day powerhouse here in Aspen, and I remember T. Caparel and some of those guys and Wid Herwick going up on Smuggler Mountain, pulling all that pipe out. They loaded, I don't know, 3 or 4 carloads of scrap from the mines and from around whatever they could get, and so they would ship out steel for to the Pueblo mills and the steel mills in Pueblo and for the war effort. And we had gasoline rationing, we had sugar rationing, sugar was rationed, tires were rationed, so we had stamps. I remember my parents, were going through the stamps, the meat. I think you had to have meat stamps for meat, so everything was rationed. So it was, everybody participated. And of course, the other thing was that the local economy, anyone that hadn't gone into service, the young bucks who joined up in the Army or the Navy or wherever they went, some of the miners and that they were too old for the draft, or for whatever reason they couldn't get into the military. They went over to Pando and built Camp Hale. That was the big thing. That was the employment. Everybody got on the train, whatever they could get, or drive over, and they drove over and they put up all those barracks for Camp Hale. So all the menfolk built the barracks at Camp Hale, and my mother, she went down to nursing wasn't all that great here in Aspen, so she went down and worked in Remington Arms munitions plant, and she worked in the munitions plant for a while, and then she found out that she could do better nursing in the San Diego area, so she and I hopped a train. I think sometime I think it was maybe in the winter of '43. I remember going laying over in La Junta and waiting for our connection from Chicago from the east. And while I was there, fortunately, she had managed to secure a Pullman berth, which was very unusual. But while we were in that Pullman berth in the La Junta yards, waiting for the train from Chicago to join up on the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe, there were troop trains coming through. And they were parked, you know, they would stop in La Junta, and I'd see these soldiers and their wives and families, different people on leaves, servicemen standing, you know, and I thought, gee, how lucky I am, you know, here I am in a bunk, you know, in a nice Pullman berth, and these poor guys are in the service, they're standing up with their wives and kids. But I remember that scene quite vividly, you know, you know, waiting, you know, the train then would move, and you'd see another view of passengers, you know, standing.
I've read that when the trains were passing through the small towns in the Midwest, the town folk would turn out in sandwiches and coffee that type of thing. And speaking of munitions plants, I grew up in World War II also, and we had a Victory Garden, and my mother saved the bacon fats for the munitions, We made it okay, though, didn't we, Jim?
Oh, that's right. And we saved, you know, the foil off of the cigarette packages and everything. But it was an all-out effort. The whole country was behind it. You know, I mean, everybody was behind the war effort. That's what they call it. You know, they had savings bonds drive, the whole 9 yards, as they say.
Yeah.
So and of course, you know, that at the end of the line was victory. You know, that's what everybody was working towards, was victory.
Yeah. Well, anyway. In 1950, the Korean War started.
Yeah.
That was 5 years after. And you wound up in the Marine Corps. How did you happen to join the Marine Corps, Jim?
Well, of course, you know, at that time they still had the Selective Service Act. You know, of course, I had a draft. I think I had a draft number or a draft classification. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I had registered because I think the draft was still in effect. I'm not sure if that was a carryover from World War II or what it was, but that wasn't what influenced me so much. It was just that I had heard and read about the Korean campaign and the invasion of South Korea by the North Koreans. And of course, you know, then the brilliant maneuver that was pulled off with the Incheon landings and what a brilliant stroke that was. And then, of course, then after that, you know, the Marines had, and the 7th Army, I think it was it the I'm trying to remember which army.
I think it was
10th Corps, but it was
the 8th Army over there on that side.
On the east side, but anyway, then the landings at Wonsan and the Marines going up into the Chosin Reservoir, you know, and then of course that's when the Chinese entered into it. But I was aware of all that what was taking place and everything, and of course, you know, being an American, my fervor was up, and I thought, you know, it was time for me to join up and enlist. So I went down, and I always had admired the Marine Corps, you know, and I just went down and saw the Marine Corps recruiting officer in Denver, talked to him and everything, and they said, well, of course, you're an only son and everything else. You can't probably do before you hitch, but we can probably put you in the reserves, or put you in reserve status. So they signed me up, and then they said, well, this, I think it was in December, I talked to them, late November, December. And so then I got a call, and they said, you need to report to active duty here and get sworn in, report to Denver. And I did. They swore me in, and I was put on a train. Everything was trained in those days, and shipped to San Diego for my boot camp training.
Who met you at the train?
Well, I think there was a Marine Corps officer or sergeant or something there. There was, but they gave me my orders, and you know, I just looked at it and I said where I was supposed to report to. And
what was your first day at boot camp like, Jim?
You know, it was a whole different experience. You know, just you know, I was just kind of I was sort of terrified, I guess, in a way, because, you know, these instructors were and everything else, you know, and of course you had to go through all the hurdles, you know, you had to take physicals and the whole, we had to strip down and go through the line and do our physicals, and then we issued our clothing and everything, and of course, you know, we got our hair cut, you know, they asked you, how would you like your hair trimmed, you know, and zip, you know, and off it came, and everything. And so it was a great experience.
Do you remember any of your drill instructors' names?
Well, of course,
Or any
Shellman
of them?
and Roth, I think it were, but they were pretty mild guys, actually. They weren't all that bad. They and I think they had actually been called up too, so they were, they were drill instructors, but, there were a lot tougher ones, and I felt I was kind of lucky, The one thing I found I learned quick was no lip, no talking back, stand up straight, shoulders back, add attention, yes, sir, no, sir. Do as you're told, and
How about volunteering? Did you volunteer?
Oh, I found out quick about that. We had one guy come in. He says, he had a Texas drawl, and he came in and he got real friendly. And he says, "How many of you guys from Texas?" And that, and next thing you know, the hands went up. Oh yeah, I'm from Texas, or I'm from this part. Oh, good. Well, guys, guess what we're going to do here? We're going to ride the range tonight, And so, riding the range then was, cleaning with these big bricks, cleaning these stove tops and stuff. So, but I learned that, but I like the terminology that he used. He says, "Well, fellas, you guys from Texas, we're going to go ride the range tonight." I laughed at that. I remember that, So it's one of those things that.
Were there World War II veterans among you that got called up?
Well, yeah, in the outfit, not in boot camp. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were all young bucks in boot camp. No, there were no that I know of any veterans. I think once you go through boot camp, that's enough. I don't think they put you through it twice. But in my outfit, especially in Korea, there were over half of the outfit, more than half, were reservists. Were reservists who were called up to active duty from various squadrons around, and they made up, basically, made up the squadron. The squadron was probably already activated for some time, but they had to, you had to replace and stuff. Because the tour of duty over in Korea was about a year, but over half my outfit were reservists. Mm-hmm.
Well, you mentioned every Marine's a rifleman, even though you're in a different military occupational specialty. Right. Where did you do your marksmanship training?
I was at Camp Matthews on the rifle range in Camp Matthews.
Have you been back to?
And they had the old term baggage drawers. Remember they used to raise it up and everything. Mm-hmm. Baggage drawers. But I came close. I think you had to have 220 to be an expert. I was 219, so I ended up as a sharpshooter. I didn't end up as a. Yeah. As I was 1 point short of being.
Well, have you been back to see where Camp Matthews?
I read about an article about it, but I understand it's gone. It's
University of California.
Oh, is it?
At La Jolla.
La Jolla, is that what it is?
It's a college campus now.
College campus.
Yeah.
But I know that they had a big, huge a tower there. That you had to jump. They had a training also for a ship evacuation. And you had to jump off. And that. And you had to hold, that was, but they also had that in San Diego too. But remember, you had to put your fingers like this to your nose, and your other hand on your groin, and what they call, evacuating the ship, overboard. You had to go through that and then go under the water. You had to qualify. So I remember that. But they had a big tower up. I remember up at Matthews too. So I don't know if that was part of that purpose or not. So.
Well, how was it that you ended up in the aviation field, not infantry?
Well, I think it was because of my background, my electrical background, and I had taken some ICS courses with International Correspondence School when I was working in the powerhouse. See, when I got out of, actually, I need to backtrack a little bit. When I was growing up, when I went to high school here in Aspen, I used to hang out at the powerhouse. The building is still underneath the Castle Creek Bridge, and so Gene Robinson was the plant superintendent for the power plant. My uncle Duke Workentine worked in that powerhouse too. See, so most of my family, Art Mickelson and my uncle Duke and that, were all in the electrical business. My uncle was a mine electrician in the Collinhoven Tunnel. So I became interested in that. I used to hang around the powerhouse, and finally Gene Robinson, when the Roaring Fork Electric Light and Power Company sold it to Mountain Utilities, he decided to, they became the plant superintendent, and they wanted him up in the office, in more of a managerial position. So he saw me hanging around there. He says, "Hey, because he was working the relief operator. He says, I need someone to pull relief shift down at the powerhouse. Would you be interested in that? And I was still in high school. And I said, sure, I'll give it a try. So he said, well, come on down here for a few Sundays and Saturdays, and I'll show you how to run this powerhouse. And so he did, and I went to it like a fish to water, and picked up on it. And so whenever I had a chance, while I was working in the power plant as relief operator, and I'd go to school, I'd work the Sunday day shift, the Saturday swing shift, and graveyard shift on Wednesday. Get out of the powerhouse at 8 o'clock, run up the hill, grab a bite to eat, and then go to school. Did my last year in high school, so I picked up on that. So when 1950 rolled around, the invasion of South Korea by the North Koreans, I was working in the power plant, and I had picked up a lot of. I was studying power engineering, so I had a lot of electrical background. Plus, I was taking a course, ICS course in radio technology. So basically, learning communications. So I had that background, and I think that was the reason why after I got out of boot camp, I was assigned to. I was given an MOS of aviation electronics, and I was assigned to transport squadron at Lt.Col.
The Marine Corps has a way of finding out talents, don't they?
Yeah, they do. Well, you fill all that out, and they run you through different kind of tests, and so evidently I was selected for that. So I was in the transport squad, and basically I worked on radio equipment, mostly radio directional finders.
Did you go to a school before you deployed?
No, I was thinking they were going to send me to radio school, but they needed the manpower, I guess, in the squadron, and they just short-circuited me, and they just said, no, you're going right on up to
OJT?
Yeah, that's right.
On-the-job training.
OJT, that's right, and that's what I picked up a lot of it. But I went to it pretty fast. I picked up on it pretty quick because my background was, I had already had an electrical background.
How did you get over to Korea? What mode of transportation?
Okay, well, when I was in the transport squadron, one day I was called up to the CO's office, and he said, how would you like to go to, give me the usual pep talk. And he says, well, they need men, we're going to. So next thing I knew, I got the word that I was going to be shipped overseas, on a replacement draft. So we were told to, get our gear together and our field kits together and everything. And I don't know exactly where we marched to, but I think they loaded us aboard some what do they call the 6x6s or something like that?
6 tire chassis.
Yeah, 6.5
ton trucks.
Yeah, 6x6s, and took us down to the train station there, and then we all unloaded and then waited for the train, and we boarded the train, and then I think the train went through Oceanside, and we picked up a contingent of Marines from Pendleton, and we went by train down to San Diego, and unloaded and disembarked the train in San Diego, and then boarded the troop ship in San Diego.
Remember the name of the ship?
Yeah, General William Weigel is what they refer to. It was a Kaiser ship, a Kaiser troop ship, and had another name. They used to call it Kaiser Coffins.
One of the troop ships from World War II.
But it was World War II troop ship in that. Vintage, that's right. It was basically a good ship. It was civilian crew on it. I think they were maritime service, but there were 5,200 of us. I think more Army than there were probably Marines on there, but there was a big contingent of Marines on there, and it was a 2-week journey.
2 weeks.
And I remember the chow line wrapping around, and it had what they call officers' country. Like get a kick out of this, and enlistedmen's quarters. And our bunks were, I forget how high they were. I think 4 bunks high, something like that. But the tables that they served you on the table were just steel table with a couple pipes, and we just stood, and ate our chow, and the ship would rock and roll and stuff like that. But and of course, many a Marine went topside to unload their their breakfast or stuff. I made a few trips topside too. You
did, Jim. Yeah. Well, I had a similar experience. I sailed for Vietnam from San Diego in 1966 with my outfit to Vietnam, and I remember sailing out of San Diego and at Point Loma. All the wives and girlfriends are standing up there waving at you. So seems like there's a lot of history in the Marine Corps sailing out from the West Coast.
From San Diego, that's right. San Diego.
San Diego.
That's right. A lot of ships went out of San Diego. That's right. So.
Well, when you got to Korea, what Marine Air Group did you join?
Okay, I was assigned to MAG 12, Marine Air Group 12, and they were headquartered in Pusan K1, just outside of Pusan, and that's where I was assigned to. And then I was assigned to a fighter squadron called designated VMF 513 and ANL in the in Marine Corps nomenclature. Was F was designation. Later on, it was changed to VMA, attack. But at that time, and the N was NL was designation for night, and the L was for all weather. So so that was basically VMF 513. But no, I'm getting mixed up with the Corsair designation.
Corsair, yeah. There's another VMF 214.
Yeah.
You remember that one?
That was our outfit.
In your mag?
Yeah. In our mag was 513, 214, the Black Sheep Squadron of Pappy Boyington's day, and that outfit had been up in when I joined it, had been up in the Wonsan Hungnam area, on the evacuation of basically the pull out from the Chosin Reservoir, and then there was 312, which was the old checkerboard squadron. And in one thing of interest is that there was a pilot from the checkerboard squadron who engaged a MiG-15 and shot it down, turned the inside of it and shot it down. So that was the first, was that a Corsair, that was the one time a Corsair plane shot down a MiG-15.
A propeller plane shooting down a jet.
A jet. That actually happened. That's that's part of Marine Corps history.
It is. And Pappy Boynton was a Congressional Medal of Honor winner in the Pacific in World War II. So you were. What was the mission of your squadron, Jim?
Well, our squadron was basically interdiction and ground support. But interdiction was basically to interdict troop movements coming down from the north, especially at night, and that was the primary mission of VMF 513. The squadron that I was in was night interdiction raids, but also they provided air cover and support for the 1st Marine Division when it was, and also they provided air cover and night cover for some of the Air Force units when they were stationed over on the. When we moved over to K8, but that occurred when we were over at K8. Mainly when we were at K18 or K1, they were basically doing interdiction runs at night.
Well, you were,
and then also air support when it was called up, when the division called for air support.
You were basically doing maintenance, but did you?
Maintenance. That's what I did.
Did
that was
you do any
radio maintenance?
Flight missions? Did you ever go up?
Well, the only thing I went up was on. I managed to get a few flights with the flare planes. There was a unit that was Navy. It was a Navy crew. They were what they call a privateer. Was a PB-4Y2, and there were 2 of them assigned. They were actually out of Sasebo, Japan, but then they because they could get more airtime over there, they moved them into at K1. And which is just outside of Pusan, and there were these PB-4Y2s where they were 4-engine patrol bombers, basically operated by Navy crew, but they were designated Fat Face 1 and Fat Face 2, and what they needed help with was, a lot of times they would give us, the squadron would give them help loading flares. We had to load the flares. A lot of times, they had, the bomb bays were secured so that. They couldn't be opened readily, So and then we stacked those flares inside the plane, and then they would all get some help from the squadron, mostly enlisted men, to help with the flares because the crew itself was too busy dealing with observations and manning the armament on the plane and everything. So they would usually get 2 or 3 grunts, usually 2 grunts or that, to help with the flares, and where the navigator part was, there was a guy there that called out for the flares, and he would say, drop 6, something. They would give us a setting, and we would run they were long tubes, and we'd hook it. They had a trigger thing on them, and they would hook on, and then you would shoot them out what they call the poop shoot, and they'd run a string of flares along there. And that's what the flare planes did. So I was invited to go along on it. They said, you want some duty? You want some air duty up there? I said, sure, I'll go up. I'll give it a try. And so I went up there, and of course, to my embarrassment, the first trip up there, I got sicker than a dog, and I got that because that plane was banking and turning, and I lost my chow, and everything, and but they fortunately had some back. They just laughed at me, stuff and everything. You'll get over it, and stuff, and so. Well, so I went over there, but so the first time was an embarrassment for me because I was sick. I was not much help to them.
Well, you're not the only one, Jim.
So,
during that period, it seems like we were transitioning. We were bringing helicopters in for the first time, and transitioning from props to jets. Did you get involved in any of that?
Yeah, well, we had what they call, just at the tail end of when I was in Korea, the AD-3 came in, which was a jet fighter that was assigned to VMF 513, and it was quite a plane, and everything. I was quite impressed with it and everything, but as far as I'm concerned, the sweetheart plane was the old Corsair, But that transition, you're right, we were taking that. A lot of our gear, a lot of stuff was World War II. A lot of those planes had seen, probably had seen action in the South Pacific. That Corsair was a good plane, and everything, and it was.
Well, I'll tell you a little bit my experience with the Corsair in Vietnam. We had Corsairs supporting us, close air support, in '66 at the first, and then they brought the jets in, and we transitioned those over to the Vietnamese. So I know the payloads they could carry.
Oh, they could carry.
Workhorse.
They were great. They were a great workhorse and everything, and they're really good. And they were right there on top of things. The division or someone would call for a close, and then of course we had from the air wing from the squadron, we would usually have what they call a FAC, forward air control. But a lot of times they would assign someone from the air wing up there, an officer usually for forward air control with the division, and they would call for strikes, so there would be the coordination between the air wing or the squadron and the division, So battalion of that would call for an airstrike someplace. They were right on top of it, and so the forward air controller, he was essential, for calling in airstrikes and that. So, but what was important too was keeping the communications going, and that's about where I felt that I at least had some part in participating in the effort. Was that, my job was pretty mundane and routine. It was, when the plane would come in or it was shot up or whatever it was, we had to take the gear out of it, or if the gear had failed, we had to bring the gear out and take it into the shop and service it and try to get it back in operation and everything. And of course, one of the problems was that a lot of the radio equipment was still the old tubes, the old tubes and everything, and they would take, even though they were trying to go to solid state or make pretty good quality stuff, it was still, the tubes would fail, and you'd have to replace them. So now everything's solid state, you see. But we had our little black boxes like the IFF, which was called Intercept Friend or Foe, and it was a device that was at that time was considered pretty top secret, and it was to intercept. The plane could tell at night, whether it was a friend or foe. It would send out a signal, so you knew immediately if there was an aircraft in the vicinity that wasn't supposed to be what it was, because these boxes were rather important, Well,
it was pretty cold there in the support. You weren't there for chosen, but in servicing the aircraft in the wintertime, what were some of the
getting them started up and everything, and stuff, and we had to cover them and everything, trying to get some heat into them and everything. Sometimes, it was just keeping in. The only advantage of having been a night squadron was that at least the planes, mostly were doing night duties. So even though the temperatures were bad, most of the planes would come in. It was daytime. You you did have a little bit more of the elements there, but when the weather got bad, like up at K-18, you know, we had some big snows come in and dump on the landing field, and there was a couple times when we got snowed in, and they had to, you know, they had to get the runway opened up, and I have pictures, you know, of us. You know, we didn't have snow removal.
You didn't have
like
snow
they had,
removal?
Like out at they hadn't planned for that. You know, I guess it could have been in the South Pacific too long. You know? But you think, but the snow would come that one year. It came in, and so they put everybody out there to get anybody, you know, whatever they could scrape up to move the snow. You know, and
that was like expeditionary landing fields, the metal invasion,
yeah, it was
invasion mats.
We call it. Yeah, there's just invasion mats, what we call it. It was just, you know, that metal stripping and stuff. But even that stuff, it sunk into the mud, you know, and everything, and the runway got rutted and everything, and it was, you know, it was tough duty for the pilots, you know, trying to land on that stuff, you know, and it was a mess, but we managed to get through it and everything. But it was. The one thing I remember about Korea was there are two things about Korea. Summertime was hot and smelly, rice paddies, and wintertime was cold and frigid, you know, and everything. And it, you know, was the weather conditions were at best deplorable, you know, most of the time. You know, like just I don't remember any really pleasant weather over there much, you know. The rice, the paddy smelled too.
Yeah. Well, we had the MASH tents in Vietnam. Did you have those there?
Oh yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, we had this what they call the squad tents and everything. Just and we had the oil burner and the stovepipe that went up through there and everything, and we burned fuel oil and we kept warm. We had sleeping bags, you know, and bunks, but we didn't have to be razor sharp, as they say, like you've been stateside, you know. I mean, you know, where you bounce the quarter off the bunk, you know. There it was just pretty much just sleep in your sleeping bag. And
what about the food, Jim?
Food was always good. It seemed like me. Like I don't know what those cooks and stuff, you know, in the mess tents or whatever it was, you know, they did a superb job. You know, they always. That's one thing is we always had good chow. It seemed like the only time I didn't think we had good chow was aboard ship on the troop ship when we had those, you know, those powdered eggs, you know, that smelled like vulcanized.
Yeah, and milk, powdered milk, powdered eggs.
Milk and powdered eggs. I didn't care for that. If you could get a real egg, you know, that was really something. So the powdered eggs I didn't care much for, but we had some good times. Oh, speaking of eggs and pancakes or whatever it is, I got to tell you a story about the Marine Corps birthday. We were up on K-18, and they had the Marine Corps birthday, and they said, oh, we got to have a party, you know.
10th November.
10th of November. We still have that. And so anybody knows how to bake a cake? We said, we didn't even have the ingredients to make a cake or anything. So I said, well, we got to have a party for the Marine Corps birthday. I said, we'll get together. We'll have a Marine Corps celebration here. So we went down to the mess hut. You know, I think it was at that time. I think it was they had put up a Quonset hut for it and everything. Well, I went in and I got a big stack of pancakes. We just stacked them up, you know, about that tall. And then somebody said we get somebody scrounged up some kitchen matches, and we didn't have candles, so we just stuck a bunch of kitchen matches all our way around. And I don't know and we didn't, but we had that whole thing practically filled up, and then somebody lit that thing off and towards the top of that pancake. But our Marine Corps birthday was and I think we just used pancake syrup in between for the frost. I don't think we had anything. Oh, I think somebody did. Somebody came up with the idea to get some powdered sugar or that, and I think and sprinkle on top of the syrup and that. But anyway, that was our. We used pancakes and we sliced it up and.
Marine Corps improvisation.
That's right. But that was, I remember that the Marine Corps birthday we had a pancake cake.
Well, you know, a lot of the units were short-handed. They had to call the reserves up.
Oh, yeah.
And I know my battalion, I wasn't in Korea, but in Vietnam, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines landed at Pusan, went over to Incheon, did the landing, called back, and wound up in Chosin Reservoir. But what happened, Bob Hope got to eastern South Korea before my battalion got there, and the show was going on for the troops. And Did you get to see Bob Hope over there?
No, he came. He did a show at our base at K-18, but I missed out on that. Unfortunately I had pool guard duty, and we had an ammunition dump there. A lot of our supplies were landed by LST on the beach. We were just right adjacent to a beach area there, and we had a big ammo dump there where you know, and they unloaded all this paraphernalia off these LSTs and bring them in there, and so it seemed like about every other day I ended up getting guard duty a lot of times, you know, at night, because the planes were usually out a lot of times flying, so they needed that to secure that ammo dump and that. So we were checked up, you know, by the OD on occasion on everything. So it was adjacent to a Korean cemetery. It was kind of spooky, but it was right on. It was cold. It was right next to the beach, and you'd see the waves roll in and everything. But I'd pull guard duty. So anyway, the day that Bob Hope came in, I was on guard duty, so I missed that show. But the fellas told me it was a great show and everything. So, but I didn't get to see it.
Well,
I was posted on that. You know,
you were there one Christmas. What was that like? Christmas in Korea.
Well, it was different. I happened to have Christmas Eve. I happened to have guard duty that night. Again, you know, like I was always on guard duty, you know. But
Yeah.
but I got my duty was up at what was it? 1,200, not 1,200 hours.
2,400.
2,400 hours, and so I managed to get in, and just they were having midnight mass, and I remember that was being able to see that. But I remember going to where they were conducting midnight mass, and I was able to have midnight mass, and then that day, that next day, we had a sit-down dinner, and everybody sat down, you know, and
did you read what you had for dinner that day, Jim?
Okay, well, this is a copy of a menu from. This is the front of it. I donated this to the Flying Leatherneck Museum in Miramar, Marine Corps Air Station, the original. But this is a copy of it, and it says Marine Aircraft Group 12, K-18 Korea, Christmas Day 1951 dinner menu, 1st Marine Air Wing, Colonel R.C. Mangrum commanding. I guess you knew
General
him.
Mangrum, yeah.
General Mangrum. He was a colonel then.
Right,
see?
right.
So see, you could have done great things if you just stayed in the Corps.
Well, I know.
You've been general.
Had to retire in Aspen, Jim.
But anyway, this is the Christmas message from the commanding officer of Marine Aircraft. It says, to all hands in Marine Aircraft Group 12 and the attached and Jason serving in K-18, I extend sincere Christmas greetings. May this anniversary of the birth of Christ mean to us a renewal of faith, a new dedication to the cause of ultimate peace and goodwill among men. R.C. Mangrum, Colonel, U.S. Marine Corps. And of course, the menu was, believe it or not, this is amazing, this menu. Menu was shrimp cocktail, roast young turkey, giblet gravy, cranberry sauce, poultry dressing, buttered peas, whole kernel corn, candied sweet potatoes, snowflake potatoes, hot Parker house roast, stuffed celery, pickles, olives, mincemeat, pie, fruitcake, hard sauce. I think that maybe hard sauce might have had some whiskey in it. Who knows?
I know.
Fresh fruit, mixed nuts, candy, fruit punch, coffee, and so cigarettes. You know, the thing
Cigarettes
is,
too.
Cigarettes. You know, the rations. You know, when the rations came in, you know, in the sea rations and stuff, you know, they always included cigarettes.
Not in today's Marine Corps. It's not politically correct or whatever.
Correct, but then we got cigarettes. You know,
Yeah.
it was.
Well, I know that
It was okay to smoke then.
wherever we were, if it could, in the field, the Marines served the best meal they could. Coffee had to be hot. I remember the nomenclature for coffee is coffee black,
that's right.
scalding, one each.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
always had
That's right.
the hot coffee there. Yeah.
You bet.
Well, Jim, you left Korea and came back and got discharged.
Yeah, I was processed out of Treasure Island. Basically, I went over on the 10th replacement draft, and the routine there was, you know, you put a year in, and then you rotate it. You know, that's why they call it rotation of that. You know, and basically, my time was up. So, boy, hooray! I could get out of this place. You know, and so But I got that same ship.
Came back on the Kaiser coffin?
On the same ship, the William Weagle. I got that ship back, but we were supposed to go to Long Beach and disembark at Long Beach, but the ship was taking on too much water, I guess they said was. So they, you know, it was creaking and groaning and everything. So they decided, well, they're going to put us into the shipyards at Mare Island. So they dropped us off at Treasure Island. You know, San Francisco we went through. But I remember though that we got a good welcome. That's the one thing is that when we came in through the Golden Gate Bridge, and I remember that we went by the Embarcadero, we landed or that. Well, there was a whole group of folks out there just waving at us, and we had a band and everything. So we got a good welcome back. You know, I know that wasn't the same situation when you were in Vietnam, you know, but they still appreciated what we were doing when we got back from Korea, you know, and so. But anyway, I got processed out at Treasure Island. And talk about a small world. Bernie's probably down in history. Bernie Popish. Yep. He was a Navy corpsman, I think, or maybe he was a pharmacist mate, actually. I think he was a pharmacist mate, not a corpsman. But guess who? But anyway, here we're going through the line, going through our test and getting processed out. Who do I see in the line, you know, of pharmacist mates, you know, handling our stuff and everything, our test, and that was Bernie Popish. So it's a small world.
It's a small world. And Bernie, you know, worked for Tom Sardi in the mortuary. And
that's right.
The Navy found out about that work and put him in the pharmacy.
That's exactly right.
That's the way I understand it.
That's right. And there was another boy that was from in the Navy, too, that was from Aspen that I ran into when I was in Nara, Japan. We used to have what they call R&Rs. So I don't know when you got an R&R, but I managed to land an R&R when I was over in Korea, and we got to, they flew us from, we got on a plane and they flew us over to near, I think, Tommy Air Base, and I got to take an R&R for a week. And I ran into a kid from Aspen, Brent Haas was his name, and the boat in Nara, Japan. And everybody in Korea looked forward to your, what they call rest and rehabilitation or that, you know, or rest and relaxation. But a lot of the guys that came back from R&R in worse shape than
I know,
you know, so
been there.
You know how that goes.
Oh, I know, been there too.
But so it is a small world. So you know, and it's amazing though. You know, Aspen. You know, of course, I met two Aspen boys. One in San Francisco and the other one in Nara, Japan. But most of the guys on the troop ship, when I would, you know, I had some few pictures I had taken along with me, you know, and a few things about Aspen, and a postcard or two I think I kept in my stuff, and I tell them about Aspen, never heard of the place. Where's that at? You know, because most of the guys, a lot of the guys were from the South, Louisiana and South Carolina, Texas. You know, they didn't know what skiing was all about or anything like that, and they just, you know, they decided, well, gee whiz, that's some little town up in the hills of Colorado, you know.
Well, you've been back to Aspen for 55 years, Jim, and along the way, you met Ramona. Where did you meet Ramona?
I met Ramona,
your wife.
My wife Ramona in Denver when my cousin Alice was, after I got discharged from the Marine Corps, I was sort of unsettled a little bit, you know, and I could have got my job back. I did get work in the powerhouse for again, but then I decided, you know, I thought, well, I could go get a job down in Denver, so I went to work for Western Electric. I decided that, you know, I was just a little unsettled at the time, and so I decided to go to Denver and land a job with Western Electric, and I did. I went in there, and they put me through a couple of schools, and so next thing you know, I was doing power installations for Western Electric. They were really growing all over the Denver area. It was booming, and so my cousin was staying at a rooming house on Logan Street. I think it was 1045 Logan Street, and my wife Ramona was working for I think it was I don't know if it's Comfort Auto Company or John C. Reeves Tile, but she had a job there in Denver, and I met her through my cousin. You know, they had an apartment there, and next thing you know, we hit it off, and we were dating each other, and that was in the. I got discharged from Marine Corps in July, I think the July 3rd of '52. So I was down in Denver about, I think, in November, and right around in November, and June of '53, we were married. You know, I proposed to her. Took her up, I think, up on Lookout Mountain, where everybody takes their girlfriend. See the lights of Denver and
Buffalo Bill's married up there.
Yeah, was he? Yeah. But anyway, so the next thing you know, we were hitched. We were married in Arvada, and then I worked for Western Electric, and I was being moved around. I had been up in the oil boom towns of in '53 up in Wyoming, up in Lingle, in Gillette, Wyoming, and Newcastle, Wyoming, on the road, living out of a suitcase, and that wasn't conducive to being for a young married couple, you know. She was living on Stewart Street, and then I worked in some of the offices in Denver, mainly just installing power equipment. But then finally we just got kind of tired, and they were going to ship me, I think it was in '54, they were going to ship me to not Las Cruces, New Mexico, but I think Las Cruces near El Paso. I looked at that and I said, this was in July of '54, and I said, gee, that's hot down there. I said, I don't think I want to do this, you know. So I said to Ramona, what do you think about us just pack up and move back up to Aspen? So 1954, we moved back to Aspen, and I landed my job back in the powerhouse, and then I went to work also. You know, I was working graveyard shift, and then I also did electrical work in the daytime, and everybody had kind of a second job. And I remember wiring up the Glory Hole in 1954, but we had, the house is still there. We rented a house from Jimmy Snyder on Cooper Street, and that house is there. Sue Lum lives in it now. We rented that house from the Snyders for $50 a month. $50
a month.
And but it had coal stove in the living room and a coal range in the kitchen and everything. And we had a lot of snow that year. And I remember we had to stoke up that, go out to the coal shed and stoke up that coal stove.
You're still the official weatherman in town, measuring the snow.
Yeah.
You've done that for years.
Oh, yeah. I sort of got into that because when we ran the power plant, you know, the power plant always had, one of the things they always did was they made notations, you know, the weather conditions and everything, you know, what the weather conditions were like. And so that's how I kind of got into the routine of recording temperatures and recording weather conditions. Was that was ingrained in me when I worked in the powerhouse, you know, from actually when I was in high school, you know, working in the power plant.
Well, do you think your time in the Marine Corps helped you after civilian life in attaining the position of superintendent of the water department in Aspen?
I think
moving your way up.
I mean, the Marine Corps taught me several things. One thing, it taught me the ability to think for myself, to innovate, and the idea of being, you know, discipline, you know, and self-discipline and everything. It's you know, it was good for me, yeah, and everything. It made a man out of me, really. I think, you know, my Marine Corps training. It was tough, you know, especially, you know, some of the stuff, you know, and everything. But
you raised your family here. How many children, Jim?
Oh, I have 4 children. Starting with my oldest daughter, Julie Marie, and she came along in 1962. Then my second daughter, Lisa Ann, 1964. Then my oldest son, John, in 1967. He works for the Forest Service now in the Salida district. And my youngest son, Tom, in 1969. He's an architect, and he's located over in Lt.Col, Colorado. So I have four children who are exceptional. They're exceptional children, and I've all graduates of CU and
college graduates.
College graduates, and Tom was also got his architectural degree in New Mexico, I think, in Albuquerque. The University of New Mexico is where he went for his architectural degree.
Well, your family has contributed. Ramona's been very active in the Aspen Historical Society.
Yes, she was.
You have, and you've served our community as a town councilman.
Yes, I did.
What year was that? Years?
1997 to 2001, 4-year term.
4 years.
And Ramona served. I think she was on the Charter Convention. I believe her term was 1971 to 1975. I believe that's what it was. I may be wrong there. Ramona will correct me when I get home.
That's okay.
But I think it was the charter. She served with when Stacey Stanley was mayor, and I know Eve Holmeyer was on the thing. But she was the first council person, lady council person, or councilwoman, I guess. We refer to them as persons now. For the city of Aspen, she was the first woman to be elected to the city council. Although Eve Holmeyer was the first mayor, female mayor.
Well, Jim, the veterans in Aspen appreciate all the support you've given, showing up at the various memorials and even hosting the Marine Corps birthday up at the cemetery.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's become a tradition now. Colonel, that you were instrumental in starting. Was that basically we have a memorial service on the Marine Corps birthday, November the 10th, which is one day before the Armistice Day, and we go up there and we celebrate the Marine Corps birthday, but we also remember our veterans. And of course, we have some great Marine veterans up there. One of the veterans, of course, is Rick Bush, and
who started the memorial
at the courthouse, and he's buried up there. And there's a great tribute to him was the fact that not only is there a flag there for him, but there's also a little bottle of Jack Daniels there too.
That was just in a recent Aspen Times article. Jim, is there anything else you'd like to add that we haven't covered in the interview here?
No, I'm. All I can say is this: is that I am proud to have been a Marine. I'm proud to be a Marine, and it's an honor for me to have been able to have served, even though it was only for us just for a very short time. That's something that I would never exchange for anything else. It was a great experience, and my part was pretty minor, but I might have felt, well, maybe if I kept a piece of equipment functioning, well, maybe that did some good. Maybe that got a pilot home when, if his directional finder was working, then I know that maybe I did my job.
Once a Marine, always a Marine.
That's right.
Jim, I'd like to present you with an American flag on behalf of the Library of Congress, and thank you for being here with us today, Jim. Semper Fi.
Semper Fi, always faithful.
All right. Thank you.
Good.
Okay, we'll cut that one.